we were coming down 17, and Bob said, the rankings are out next week. And I said, I know. I mean, I'd been following the score panel all my life, and I knew they were coming. And he said, do you want to know where you placed? And I said, Bob, just tell me where it is. And he said, it's second. And I remember feeling like I had the wind knocked out of me, and I bent over and put my hands on my knees, and I swore quite audibly. And Bob looked at me like I was from outer space. And I said, I didn't do it to be number two, Bob. And he looked at me literally like he thought I might have been joking. I was not joking. I was so, just so dismayed.
Ben Cowan-Dewar, CEO, co-founder of Cabot, now the growing Cabot, Cabot golf brand around the world, Scotland, Canada, America, the Caribbean, and really appreciate your time. So Ben, tell me your golf story. How did you get into golf, and how did it become a part of your life?
I had a dad who was a golfer and a grandfather who was a golfer. And I think my sort of first golf memory was really, Jack winning in '86 at Augusta. And I remember, the fabric of our couch and watching it with my dad, and just how meaningful it was to him. And, I guess I was about to turn 7. So that's sort of one of those early childhood memories. And, and I think, I got a cut down golf club, and I used to bang it around our yard. I grew up on a family farm east of Toronto. And then I started watching golf religiously and drawing golf holes and playing golf, and eventually would build a golf hole on our family farm. I built a green, and I couldn't figure out, I think I was probably 12. I couldn't really figure out the revetted bunker, but I'd seen the photos. So I dug the bunker and stacked it all up. So it was really hard. And then I had a series of 7 tees, and I would mow it all myself, and I would go out and play golf after school. And then I was just, hooked and really on courses. I had a copy of the World Atlas of Golf, and, I would draw golf holes. My mom saved these drawings, and, I would draw the clubhouses and the locker rooms. And, so not only was I hooked, I was a nerd, and it's been a part of my life ever since.
So how do we get to where we are today? So it sounds like, at a young age, it seems as if you're destined to do this. But as a course developer, I mean, your path, from what I know of your path, it wasn't sort of an obvious one where you went out and, well, you made your fortune and now I'm going to go look for some good land or something like that. How did Cabot come to be?
Well, so again, I wanted to travel to play courses, and maybe I'll take you back for a second to my golf hole, because it's probably indicative of just being smaller when I was younger and not much different. But I was playing golf on my little hole, and my mom got a call asking for Mr. Cowan-Dewar, and my mom's name was Sandra Cowan, my dad's name was Peter Dewar, and so she said, Peter? And they said, no, Ben. And I was 13 at the time, and they were calling her to tell her that they were opening up phase 3 of real estate at a course north of Myrtle Beach, just in North Carolina, and that I'd, subscribe for information. And so I was forever writing places to get packages and to plan golf trips for my dad and I. And so we would go on these golf trips, and I'd go and I'd see my grandfather in Florida and try and play as much golf as I could. And so I was just hooked on golf and planning trips. And, at the beginning of the internet, I was at University of Toronto, and, I sort of thought, I love golf, I love travel, and there was literally no one on the internet, and me and like 2 other people. And so I sort of set out to do this thing in golf travel. And really that, while I was a university student, morphed into a business that we were working in 20 plus countries. And because there just were so few people on the internet, and it was such early days, and travel, it's sort of easy to forget 25 years later, but travel was really one of the things that got disrupted the most and quickly. And if you were a golf resort in Europe trying to connect with you in Philadelphia, it really was hopefully through a tour operator, or maybe by sending you, an enormous envelope with a brochure. And I think that, really I was traveling all over and saying, like, look, we can get digital photos on the internet and we can connect you with a new. And so we ended up doing golf travel, but we ended up doing a lot of golf marketing and digital marketing, and really learned how to build databases. And so, but my favorite was, there was one guy who said, this is all a bit of a scam, isn't it? And I was taken aback. I think I was in Ireland, and he said, this is just so you can travel the world and play golf. And I said, it pretty much is. Like, that's pretty much what the business, I didn't, as a university student, I had very little money, but we ended up doing, a really good job of the marketing. And I think we came up with really innovative tours, and whether it was, trying to play Pebble after the 2010 Open, or, just experiences that people would otherwise have had a tough time doing. And so that got me traveling the world. I got to play basically all of the world's great golf courses. I was on Golf Magazine's panel for, over 20 years, probably now, I guess. Having seen pretty much all of the, the great golf that was built. And the natural next step for me at 24 was to imagine that I should then go and build my own golf course. And I think it was very simple. It was, I wanted to build a golf course under a brand that I could, do it. And we found a piece of land that had been talked about for golf since before I was born in Nova Scotia. And I went and saw it 20 years ago this year, having heard about it from a minister of tourism. And at, 24 going on 25, I said, I think I can build one of the great courses in Canada. And if I can do that, it would be one of the great courses in the world. And I had my rose colored glasses on and set out to do it.
And so you have partners along the way. At what point does Mr. Keiser come into the story?
So I saw the land in December of 04, and I called Mike in January of 05, and I'd been down at the opening of Barnbougle Dunes and Tom Doak's Renaissance Cup at Cape Kidnappers. And so I knew Mike a little bit, and we spoke in January of 05. And I said, I've got this great site in Cape Breton Island. Rod Whitman, who Bill Coor and Pete Dye had both said was the most talented architect no one had heard of. And Mike had heard of Rod. He knew him. They'd explored, of all things, doing a golf course in Cuba once upon a time. And so, the first pitch I had on Cabot was a banker, and he said, that is the worst idea, with an expletive in there, that I've ever heard. And I hear bad ideas for a living. And so, almost everybody thought it was just a terrible idea, 900 miles east of my home in a very small community. And people would say things like, can't you just do this near Toronto? Like, why are you going to rural Cape Breton? And, obviously, as having seen so many of the great link sites, to have a mile of ocean frontage in Canada was just, there were two coasts you could do it. And the only land that looked anything like links was this. So Mike was so gracious. He took the call, and, he basically said, look, I've bitten off more than I can chew in remote golf. Barnbougle had just opened. Wasn't clear that it would be the huge success that it has been. And Bandon Trails was opening that June. And he said, I'm long remote golf. I'm not your guy. And I sort of called it the polite brush off. But he said, wait, Ben. And I said, yeah. And he said, you got to get more land. I said, Mike, I don't have enough money to build the first course. I'm really long real estate in this community. Like, I'm not sure, I can buy more land. And he said, well, you've got to, because, you'll need it and you'll be successful. And when you're successful, you won't be able to buy it. And you need land for a second course. So he said, go option it. And so I sort of thought of it as the polite brush off, but such a, wise man, and had given me the advice. And so I started optioning the land that was Cabot Cliffs. And, the community, Cabot Links was 13 parcels of land, and it was a mix of, government, provincial and municipal, volunteer groups and private landholders. And while Nicholas had done a routing plan for it, and other, Mike Hurdson had said it was one of the 50 greatest sites left for golf in the world, no one had ever really been able to assemble the land. And, I had time and a slide projector, and I would show photos of places like Sandhills and, Ballybunion and Bandon Dunes, and say, I've been to these places and I can envision something like this in a rural community really being transformative. And there was a collection of folks in Inverness who had really fostered this dream, the first conversation as far back as 1969 of building a golf course to reverse, what had been a once booming coal mining town from 1883 to 1953, but had really seen significant decline and had seen its young people leave. And, these folks, many of whom are dear friends to this day, sort of tolerated a 25-year-old telling them, I'm sure in hyperbolic language that, I really felt like I could build this, having never done anything. And, some of the questions would be, so you're a golf pro? And no, I'm not. You're a golf architect? No. Have you ever worked at a golf course? I haven't. Have you ever developed anything? No. And so eventually I'd say, like, listen, I haven't done any of this, just before we embarrassingly go through the list of things, but I could see it in Technicolor with my eyes closed. And, I was investing basically every penny I had in this dream, and thankfully I was doing okay. And I had a girlfriend who would become my wife, and two parents who all said they thought I could do it, which I think any rational person would have not said that. But so I blame the three of them, and away we went. And so I assembled the land that was the first course. And as I was doing that, and it took us from that December 04 visit to November of 07 to really do all the land assembly, I realized that nobody would have taken the time to do it. It was just so, so difficult and so hard. And part of it, I have a book of Mike Keiserisms, but, one of them is, Mike's line is, it's all a test. And so I circled back to him in November of 06, and we had a dinner in Chicago. And, it was clear to me then that, obviously trails have been a huge success, but in the intervening almost 2 years that had transpired, lots of people said they were going to build a golf course. Lots of people might have had a dream, but, that I put in the time and that it became clear I was going to be able to assemble the land, I think gave Mike sort of thoughts that, and this is, first of all, an amazing man, but also someone who had taken long shots on young people, whether it was David McClay Kidd at Bandon Dunes, or Josh Lesnick, his opening GM. I think it's a bit of a strategy of throwing them in the deep end, and you get to hear about the ones that swam. But, Mike was sort of engaged. He came in March of 07 with Bill Coor, and Rod Whitman toured them around links. We looked at the land that I'd optioned that is now Cabot Cliffs. And Mike had an entourage, and that night, as he's written in his recent book, we had a dinner, and Mike said, I'll do what is now Cliffs first, and we'll do the town course second. And I said, oh God, I can't do that. I mean, I've been here for 2.5 years, and with my slideshows showing what we would do at Cabot Links, and this was really so integral to the town. And I remember what seemed like an eternity. I'm sure it was probably a handful of seconds, but there was just silence, and I could see everybody looking at me like Mike Keiser was standing there ready to back me, and I was saying no. But I think again in the Mike liking Tess and caring deeply about integrity, I think that mattered to him. And he said, fine, we'll do it your way and we'll do Cabot Links first. And so that was March of '07. We got the land deal done in November. I moved from downtown Toronto to Inverness, Nova Scotia, with my wife 35 weeks pregnant, to a house that was not yet complete. And it sort of seemed like all of the stars were falling into place. And then, of course, the Great Recession happened. But that's how Mike became involved. So November of '07, he officially said he'd back me, and we became partners.
So Mike Keiser initially gives you the polite brush off. The folks in town are asking very good questions about the experience what experience you have that you don't have. What is it about you, Ben, that, that those kinds of responses are enough, or a banker telling you this is the worst idea I've ever heard? Those kinds of responses are enough to make a lot of people say, all right, I'll do something else. What is it about you that kept you going down this path?
I probably couldn't get a job doing anything else. So that was probably one good thing that would keep steering me back. And, I think entrepreneurs have deep amounts of fear and self-loathing, Tom. I think even really up until when they've, done something. And I think it eventually goes away, but it takes a long time. And I certainly had it. And, people were trying. I mean, people said terrible things. That is one thing that does happen to young entrepreneurs, is you endure a lot of people telling you it's, really, really a terrible idea and that they know better. And I think, those are tough things to overcome. And there were lots of sleepless nights and lots of trips, particularly before Mike agreed to partner, where I literally am, using up every penny I've made at this young point in my life and what I thought had been a successful business. And I'm investing in a business that everybody's telling me, won't be successful. And I would fly to Halifax from Toronto. And it seemed like every time I landed there, it was raining. And there, I was always renting with, budget rental car, which was at the farthest corner of the parking lot. And there's now a whole parkade, but I used to have to walk across this parking lot in the pouring rain. I'd be drenched by the time I got in my car, and I'd start driving. But every single time I pulled onto Cape Breton Island, the sun sort of came out and you sort of saw this land that was so breathtaking. And I'd see the people and I'd stand on the site and I'd smell the salt air. And I just had an enduring belief that it could be done, and that if it was, it would be really amazing. And, I had that every single time I got to the site, and the entire journey each time I had lots of thoughts of, this. And I honestly think if in those 2 years of, sort of toiling along and not getting a lot of positive reinforcement, somebody had said they'd give me, $100 and a pat on the head, or they'd take it forward and build it, I might have passed the baton. I think I just wanted to see it done, and I wanted to see the town done right by it. And I think that probably kept me going.
We had a great dinner at the PGA show this year, and you talked a little bit about the initial reception from the town. And I would say, like, they didn't quite get it. How did you push through that? And then when the course comes out, right? I mean, or the course opens, you get your first ranking. And I thought that was a great story that revealed sort of, maybe this is one of your keys to success, your competitive nature.
Well, I think, so I think the town got the promise of links golf. I think, it had been a dream of theirs before it was a dream of mine. So I don't think it was so much that, maybe the town fathers who had pushed this dream didn't get it. Many of them had been to St. Andrews, and sort of, so they knew it. So I think there was a cohort that absolutely believed in it. I think there was a very healthy degree of skepticism from the vast majority of the folks in town. my first person, as I was pumping gas, I said, what do you think of this golf course idea? And he said, that'll never happen. And so there was certainly a lot of that. And again, we started building just before the financial crisis, and, we almost didn't continue. And that winter of '08 and '09 was so terribly difficult. And, Mike had called and said, I don't think we can move forward. And so, we came up, and so I think people were naturally skeptical because every golf course in existence stopped. And I think, Golf Digest in '09 said we were one of 4 golf courses in the world under construction. So it was slow going. It was difficult times. There are lots of reasons to be skeptical, but really, I think it's a rural, and I grew up in rural Ontario. It's a rural protection of not wanting to get your hopes too high to have them dashed, and progress and change have not been kind to, rural world in the last 50 years. It's almost all been losing things as opposed to gaining them. But I think when we opened, and that fellow who said, it would never happen the day before we opened, as we had, big event tent and we had opening day and people arriving. Somebody said, what do you think now? And he said, it's not open yet. So, I knew we'd have to convince our fair share of folks, but, we were so lucky. Bill Pennington wrote a piece in the New York Times the weekend we opened, and it was the cover of the Sunday Sports, a 2-page inset. And, there really, as you remember, in 2012, there was no golf opening. So I think that piece, which Bill wrote so beautifully, captured a lot of imagination and was a really new and neat story in golf. And that really, launched us forward. And on opening weekend at Cabot Links, there's a great photo I have of Mike Keiser, Bill Coor, and I walking around, Cabot Cliffs. And on every opening, everybody says, like, what's next? And I'm always hoping I might just get to enjoy the day without having to think about what's next. But we actually were trudging around at Cliffs the day after we opened Links. And so, that success came, pretty quickly, and we moved ahead with Cliffs with Bill Coor and Ben Crenshaw. And the first ranking you're asking about, Bob Weeks, the great Canadian golf writer who had been the longtime editor of Score Golf and the head of the Score panel, was walking around Cabot Cliffs. I don't know if this is a good story to tell. Maybe it's a better one left untold. But we were coming down 17. And Bob said, the rankings are out next week. And I said, I know. I mean, I've been following the Score panel all my life, and I knew they were coming. And he said, do you want to know where you placed? I said, of course I do, Bob. And he said, highest debut ever. I said, just tell me the number, Bob. And he said, first time a Canadian course has been in the top, the top 10. I said, Bob, just tell me where it is. And he said, it's second. And I remember feeling like I had the wind knocked out of me, and I bent over and put my hands on my knees, and I swore quite audibly. And Bob looked at me like I was from outer space, like I was, I'd been such a jerk and, a young punk. And I said, I didn't do it to be number 2, Bob. And he looked at me literally like he thought I might have been joking. I was not joking. I was so, just so dismayed. And anyway, so I think, that's sort of, God, what would I have been, 32 maybe. So that's sort of a young punk and naive. But the goal was, to be number 1. And on that list, we've been 1 and 2 in Canada at some point since, with both Cliffs and Links. So, I think it's really setting out to do something extraordinary. And it was just so difficult. I mean, it really was. It's just so hard to, pull these things off and to have them be successful. I think, you sort of have to have an audacious goal, or else it probably wasn't worth doing.
So competitiveness, setting high goals, what are your keys to success? I mean, either personally, things that you have to do or focus on, or organizationally, priorities that you've set?
Well, I have a poster on my wall right there that says work hard and be nice to people. And I think that, that is seemingly simple, but I sort of think, the entrepreneurial constructs of the great entrepreneurs are all pretty simple. Mike's were do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and be someone people want to work with. Sounds very, very, very simple. Almost no one does both of those things. And, another great entrepreneur's line of the right decision is terrific. The wrong decision can be fixed, but no decision kills you every time, I think, is another one. I think that the doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it literally, means showing up early for a meeting. It means being on time, right? I mean, it's like that's a very simple thing. If you say you're going to be there at noon, you get there a couple minutes early. And I think those things, have paid enormous dividends. I've been so blessed to have such wonderful mentors. And I think golf gave me that more than it gave me many, many, many gifts. But I think it gave me the ability to connect with these. I mean, if I'd been in widgets, I certainly wouldn't have gotten to meet, Julian Robertson or Herb Kohler or, Mike Keiser. And golf gave me time with them to know them and, sort of learn lessons of life. And I think I was probably always a little bit older than my age. So I've still got lots of friends in their 80s.
So who do you rely on and trust the most?
Well, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you sort of have to rely and trust yourself the most every single day. And I think, it's a long journey to get to a place that you feel credentialized. And to be honest, when, Cliffs opened, and to even more fanfare than Lynx, I went and tried to talk myself into a job working for the greatest private equity guy in Toronto. And, I put on a suit, and this is Cabot, this is probably 2016. So Cabot Cliffs is open, Cabot Lynx is open. It's successful. I did Cabot, and still at that point, people are telling me golf's a terrible business. You gotta stay away. You gotta diversify away from golf. And I bought some industrial service businesses, and I went and had lunch with this fellow who's one of my great friends, wonderful, wonderful, thoughtful partner. And you sort of serendipitously meet these people at the right points along the road. And I was pitching him on why he should hire me to come and work. And he's like, you'd go crazy working at my place. He's like, don't you have like a master's degree in golf? Like, can't you just go find something to do in golf? And, he told me I was unhireable again, which I'd heard. So, I went and focused on it, and that really sent me in the direction. It was actually in the fall of 15. It sent me in the direction of, okay, well, what can I do, off of Cabot? And, as much success as we were having in Nova Scotia, we weren't playing golf in January or February. And so I sort of had this notion of maybe I could go to the Caribbean, where, part of my, as audacious as you would expect of a 25-year-old, my Cape Breton plan was to build 2 courses that were in the world top 100 and would be 2 of the best in Canada. And so I sort of thought the Caribbean, which Teeth of the Dog, which I'd long admired, had been in the world top 100, but there'd never been another course in the Caribbean. So I sort of thought, well, I don't really like the winter. I live in Canada, and there's a lot of coastline in the Caribbean. So I started looking through all of the British Commonwealth islands, and in 2008, the financial crisis decimated the Caribbean, and there were many failed projects. And so, I went and just looked through all of them. And in January of 16, I saw the land that was St. Lucia, and that became clear. And Mike Keiser and his son Michael came back a month later, and we walked that land. But as soon as I stood on it, I knew I was going to do that. So I think I had to trust myself.
So that brings us to St. Lucia. Very, it's just an extraordinary property. So congratulations on what's been achieved there. How gratifying was it to see it right out of the bat, or out of the gate rather, off the bat, see it ranked so highly?
Oh, look, it's amazing. And I don't take any of that for granted. I think, seeing it ranked highly and on the cover of magazines, before it was barely open for play, those are things that still, give me goosebumps. And I think, Cliffs was such a rapid fire thing. I was in a rush, I was trying to get it done. And St. Lucia, I said to myself, I was going to enjoy the process more, because I know how quickly it goes by. It just flies by. And the dreaming, conceiving, and building are the most fun. The having conceived and getting awards is the least fun part of the process. So, and I'd worked with Bill Coor and Ben Crenshaw at Cabot Cliffs. And so to get to work with them again, I mean, these are not two of the nicest men in golf course architecture. These are two of the great men you'd meet in your lifetime. And they happen to be partners. And so I said, I'm really going to be present and enjoy it. And, we start construction and then COVID hits. And it's just like Cape Breton all over again. I called Mike and he said, well, we've got the playbook for this. We just keep building it, through. And again, that seemed contrarian in Nova Scotia through the financial crisis, certainly seemed contrarian through COVID. But, we just knew if we kept building it, this too would eventually pass. And on the other side of it, people would be happy to have this thing, open. And so, we were so lucky to have Bill and Ben's crew decide to stay there and build through COVID. And this is a period of time where flights were canceled for months, right? So it wasn't clear, they would get out of it. And I think, they kept going, and it slowed us down pace wise. And I actually think that probably was better for the golf course. And I remember, calling Mike and saying, let's go down there. I hadn't seen him. We hadn't seen each other for probably the longest stretch in our time as partners. And he said, oh, I don't know. And I said, come on, it'll just be you, me, Bill, and Ben, and we'll walk around. And I've got a great photo on my wall of the four of us that day. And we just walked all 18 holes and just talked about golf and, about life as you do. And about what they were building and giving Bill and Ben 9 greens on the ocean in a place that's 83 degrees every day. I sort of felt like it was cheating as a developer. So, they damn well should have built something that was good with that site. And they obviously did.
They certainly did. I would say it's a unique, when you think of Coor Crenshaw courses, St. Lucia stands out certainly for its boldness. The property is absolutely, it's just, dramatic doesn't quite capture it, right? How was that experience? Did you have to push them at all to kind of get out of their comfort zone at all? Or it just seemed, it's a departure, but I think in a very exciting, dramatic, wonderful way.
Yeah, no, push them, there's, you get their side of the story. I think drag them kicking and screaming probably a little bit. Bill was very, very, very concerned they weren't the right architects for the job. And, I was on a panel with Jack shortly after Bill and Ben agreed to do it. And Jack had done a routing plan in St. Lucia. And he said, I heard you're going to do St. Lucia. I said, I feel so terrible because I idolized Jack, back to what was my first memory. And I used to wake up and watch those Masters highlights on Thursday and Friday night on CBS. And I just loved Jack, loved the Masters. And I said, we're going to use Bill and Ben in St. Lucia. So that was my Pebble Beach site, I said, oh, I know. But, it was Jack had done a hell of a routing. And it wasn't that I didn't think super highly of him. It was that I just literally had so much fun working with Bill and Ben that I thought, if they could figure it out. And it was a puzzle as it is, and figuring out a routing that, as spectacular as the photos are of that site, it's still, for me, and obviously I've been going there now for 8 years, it hits me in the chest almost, when I see it. It's like, holy moly. Or I'll see views and I'll turn. It's like I've seen them for the first time. And so I knew how jaw-dropping and awe-inspiring it was. And the real key was given the boldness and the elevation change. And now, Bill and Ben have had obviously one of the most illustrious careers, but I'd always been a huge fan of Kapalua. And I think Kapalua was a tropical, heavily undulating. I mean, just think about those closing holes that we've watched on TV for so many years and how much elevation change. So I felt like it wasn't like this. It was a dramatic departure from Friar's Head and Old Sandwich and maybe Cabot Cliffs. But, I felt like it sort of harkened a bit back to Kapalua. Bill assured me it did not. But he eventually took pity on me again. And, and what a pleasure it is to have gotten to work with them again.
So a very unique site and had some unique challenges too. I remember being down there and hearing about it because there's unique weather patterns there and the topography. There were, getting the grass to stick. There were some real innovations there and getting the property ready, if I recall.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I think we would seed everything and then you'd have, a 1 in 10 year rain event that would wash it all out. And, the nice thing about experience is the same thing happened at Cabot Links and the same thing happened at Cabot Cliffs. And so, you send folks those photos and you just say, listen, I know it's heartbreaking. I remember it so well. And, we just got to get back out there and rebuild it. And, we'll get there. And we did. And we just had, an unbelievable crew of folks. Led by Jim Barger, who was the contractor, and Keith Rebb, who stayed during COVID, and Trevor Dormer, who he and his wife Chelsea and their 2 children lived in St. Lucia for a couple of years. And, those things, when you see the output and you see the success, these things are always a human story. And it is an enormous amount of sacrifice to those individuals, to their families. And I think the creative process is beautiful, but you give up a lot of yourself in it, and I think the human cost of success is an awful lot of sacrifice. And I never take for granted what all of those folks did to make that a reality and continue to do our team on the ground, every day. It's, and it's just a spectacular place, and St. Lucia's, been a wonderful country to do business. And the people of St. Lucia, like the people of Cape Breton, were so warm and hopeful for the future and wanted to see it succeed. And, so I think the bumps in the road of development are always hard and, can throw you off balance. But I think if you can see the finished product in your mind, it's worthwhile to persevere.
Very worthwhile, and it's something. It's one of those places you have to sort of, you really kind of have to see it to believe it. It's hard to even sort of describe some of the views and some of the shots that you get to hit. So, an extraordinary contribution to golf. Now, you're in a unique position of opening 2 golf courses relatively, within months of each other. So, Cabot St. Lucia, what made you take the chance on Worldwoods, which is now Cabot Citrus Farms?
Well, I had I'd gone to Worldwoods a long time ago, and I'm a great believer in serendipity, but I got paired. They said, we're going to pair you with a Canadian. And I got paired with a hockey player named Paul Henderson, who is an absolute legend in Canada because he had famously scored the winning goal against the Russians in the Summit Series in 1972, which predated me, but he's such an icon. I knew he was. And so literally I'm at Worldwoods, and this is well over 20 years ago. And there I am playing with Paul Henderson, sort of, and it was quite a memorable day. But really, I'd played golf all over Florida at that point, and it was so different, and it felt so different. And, it felt like Georgia or the Carolinas, but it was obviously warmer in this January day I was there, and I just loved it. And I thought, I reached out, again, as I did when I had no money and lots of ambition, and, thought about buying it in, 2008, 9, and, tried in 2014 and 16. And in COVID, which was an existential crisis for us, of Nova Scotia was closed. I didn't go there in 2020. St. Lucia, there were no flights to the island for 6 months, but we had a thought that, it would be like a financial crisis. It wasn't really actually like the financial crisis was devastating for golf. And, Sea Island got sold in 2010 for $202 million. And I just remember thinking, gosh, there's going to be a chance to buy some great assets. And the two at the top of my list were Whirlwoods and Castle Stewart. And, in both cases, it created the on-ramp to have the conversation. And Mr. Inouye, who had conceived of Whirlwoods, was now 90 years old in Japan. And he'd started, and again, Tom, you know it, but Whirlwoods opened in 1993 with 36 holes of par three, a circular driving range. And, I remember Gil Hands saying it was the ninth wonder of the golfing world, the circular range. And Mr. Inouye had dreams of building more golf. He ran into savings and loan and challenges in Japan, but he sort of had this unique vision of 36 holes of public golf, and that's 6 years prior to Bandon Dunes opening. So it was a real revelation, but more than the quality of the golf, it was just the landscape was so beautiful. And so, through 2020 and into 21, we started chatting on Zoom, and, I'd come up with these innovative backgrounds of, Cabot, Cliffs, and Whirlwoods behind me, and he got a kick out of that. And he didn't speak a word of English, and I knew how to say hello in Japan, but we had a translator, and eventually he sort of, I think, saw me as the steward of his vision, which at that point was 35 years, started when he was 55 years old. And he recently passed away, but it was just a wonderful process to buy it. And I felt, honored to be able to take it on. And, I think there are few golf courses that, most places have decided where the clubhouse is or where the hotel is. Maybe they sold some homes along it. And so it's very hard to reimagine it. And I think Whirlwoods was unique in that, as was Castle Stewart. Gil and Mark Parson had built an unbelievable golf course, which I loved, and a great clubhouse. And they had permitting for a second golf course, which they hadn't built, and permitting for lodgings. But, they sort of hadn't totally told their stories. And so there was enough to reinvigorate both of those projects. And so we bought them 6 months apart. And obviously Castle Stewart, Tom Doak's building our second course there and just doing an amazing job, which will open in 25. And Whirlwoods was this thesis I had of, if you had existing golf and you could renovate it quickly, it would be a lot easier than buying 40 plus pieces of land in Nova Scotia and going through an arduous, permitting process. And again, not that I'm getting smarter, but maybe just trying to avoid the ditches more. In 2 years since we purchased Whirlwoods, we effectively had 36 holes, a 9-holer, and a par 3, which is more golf infrastructure than we have in Nova Scotia after almost 20 years. So, it certainly was an amazing opportunity, and the reception has been phenomenal. But really, that was a testament to Mr. Inouye and his original vision, and we're just happy to be a steward of it going forward.
Well, it's very, very exciting. We the Broken Tea Society, as you know, has already been there. Rave reviews. I had the chance to visit as well and do some preview play, and it is just an absolute blast. It's not the Florida golf you're used to. A special day. You know what they love the most, Ben? I mean, they love the golf holes. They love the golf course. Something very smart that you did, your placement of the halfway house. It was a very social experience there, and everyone came out feeling like they got to know each other from that day because they kept crossing paths and stopping to talk about how much they're loving the course. And so it's just a very fun place to be. So kudos to you on making that happen.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, that's the nicest compliment, right? I mean, none of our customers do this for a living. The pro golfers, get comp their green fees. So basically every single person who who pays to play golf is doing it. We do it for fun. And so I think, fun is what we're after, both in, hopefully the experience and the vibe, but, certainly the golf too. So I'll take that compliment.
Vibe, very strong vibe. Lots going on at Cabot as well. I mean, then you've got, of course, you mentioned the Highlands course, the Highlands property, Castle Stewart, formerly, which is now is going to have a Doak course. You've got Revelstoke in British Columbia, which sounds fascinating. I mean, I guess that's more of a sort of family resort you're going to have 4-season amenities there.
Yeah, Revelstoke is the golf course is at the base of, the greatest ski mountain, probably in North America. I mean, it has 5,700 feet of vertical drop, which is, almost twice most of the ones you'd think of, like Aspen and so on. And just an amazing mountain. And I've heli skied there, over the years, and I just absolutely love the town and love the mountain. And when I went to look at it, I'd said to the patriarch who owned the land that there's no good golf in the mountains because what's good for ski slopes is bad for golf courses. And, Banff Springs and Jasper Park are really the exceptions in Alberta. But I went and looked at this land, which again, Nick Faldo with Schmidt and Curley had done a routing plan, which had gone away in the financial crisis. And it was such a unique site because the mountain is obviously, rises fairly aggressively. And then it comes down into the Columbia River Valley, which then flows south to Oregon and has these beautiful views on the other side of the river valley. But the golf land was this bench land that sort of had, 25 feet of elevation change, but was never really severe. It actually reminded me at points, a bit of Brookline playing over, these outcroppings. And I was on the site and I called Rod Whitman, who had grown up in Alberta and had done Cabot Links for me, obviously. And Banff and Jasper were such seminal works. And one of the things I always loved about Cabot Links was I gave Rod a chance to build a golf course in Cape Breton where Thompson had built Cape Breton Highlands Links, which is one of my favorite golf courses. And I love Banff and Jasper, and I sort of thought Rod would really jump at the opportunity of doing something in the mountains. And so while he'd grown up in Alberta, looking at those, he actually lives in British Columbia now. So I said, can you get in the car and come over and have a look at it? And Rod Whitman is just, one of the greatest golf architects and one of the gems of humanity too. So to get to work with he and Dave Axelon and Keith Cutton on that project is proving a lot of fun. And I think it's, there aren't many places we weren't looking at particularly to do something again in Canada, although I sit in Toronto talking to you today. But Revelstoke with an amazing winter already, is just a breathtaking place to be in the summer. So it sort of seemed like, a good chance and give Rod a canvas to, put something up against Stanley's mountain work. And yeah, we're excited about that.
Haven't been up to that part of the world yet, Ben, but that's absolutely going to happen now. Do I have to take a helicopter to ski the mountain? I don't.
No, not at all.
All right. I'm not. I didn't know heli skiing was a thing, but.
Oh, it's a great thing. But, the first tee is literally, right beside the gondola that goes up. And again, the runs are unbelievably long because, just have 5,700 feet of drop. But yeah, no, it's a great ski mountain. And the proximity to the first tee to the gondola is a dream. So
will the cups at Revelstoke ring like a morning chime? Tell us about the origin. Anyone that's played a Cabot property, or if you play, at Cabot. So yeah, I think, well, I didn't see it. It's St. Lucia. The holes weren't quite in yet, but tell us the origin of the unique nature of your cups.
They're in St. Lucia too now, but
okay.
Yeah. So I'd played. I'd gone to Japan, and I was playing with Sho Tobari, and Sho, it was sort of the Johnny Miller of Japan, and we were playing at Tokyo Golf Club. And there's no place in the world that golf is more foreign as an experience than Japan. Really, truly, utterly onto itself. And And so we tee off at Tokyo with our female caddies, and I hit it down the left side, didn't hit it very well, and I hit it thin up on the green, and I had like a 50-footer, and I knocked it in, and I heard ding, which I'd never heard before, and I thought it was just the most amazing thing, and I swore if ever I got to build my own golf course, I would do this, and it actually became sort of a bit of a running joke because it was so brutally hard because the Japanese were not exporting this. So we finally got a translator and we bought them for Cabot links, and I was so excited. People really liked this. And then my superintendent said, the ferrules, the pins don't fit in them. So then we had to buy the ferrules from Japan and have them sent and cut them off and solder them. So it seemed like a lot of work, but, there was a guy in the first year at Lynx who wrote a poem about the ding, another person who put it on iTunes. And, I've had friends who you hear the ding as sort of their notification when people used to have those for text messages. So I like it. And I think, it's sort of how do we continue the strands of what was special in the first days across the various properties as we now, as you said, expand into different geographies.
It's very fun. It's very cool. It's a nice little trademark that reminds people where they are.
Well, it's all over Japan, so it's not an original idea, but yeah.
Very cool. Ben, I can't thank you enough for the time. Before we let you go, I just think, I so admire what you've accomplished, what you've brought to golf, and having seen you interact with people in different circumstances, the way that you treat people as well. How do you define what success is for you, and do you feel like you've achieved it?
Well, I think, I think we had 712 people work in Cape Breton this past year. And if you think about all the outlandish dreams I would have had, almost 20 years ago for that project, I never would have thought of that. And, Mike always has the best quote, so I'll paraphrase him and say, it's not why we did it, but it's why we do it. And I think, other than my family, there's no one who's had a greater impact on my life than Mike. And, he would often tell me to slow down. And, the old course has been there for 500 years and Dornick's been there for 400 years. So what's the rush? But I was like, we need cash flow, desperately. And so, I think when you are building something in amazing landscapes and that St. Andrews, which has always been my exemplar and is my favorite golf course, has stood the test of time and really in the most sustainable way, Tom, by how could you be that intertwined with a community if you weren't sustainable environmentally, if you didn't care about the community? These are not things we can pick up and leave. And so I think as we go into these communities and we think about building something, that we know can outlive us long after we're gone, you really take the approach that we are the stewards of this. And I think, treating every single person, the same way, and whether that's, trying to create, my favorite guest reviews are, when people say it was the greatest day of their life or it was magical. And I think we need to bring that same approach to all of our team members in all of the locations. And I think if we keep choosing places, I'm 44, I say, and I'm not totally joking, that I've got 44 good years left in me of doing this. I think if we keep going to places that, my litmus test is, do I want to come back here every year for the next 44 years of my life? And I think if we choose that and, we treat people well, I think that'll be success whenever we hang it up.
Would you like to make any big announcements here, Ben, about what's in the future for Cabot?
Well, yeah, we've got a couple of big announcements, I think, but I'm gonna make you have me back, and we'll talk about those. But I think we've got We've got a couple of biggies coming down the pipe, so we'll cross our fingers and not get ahead of ourselves, and hope we get those. And I'll give you a call and we can chat about them.
Exciting! We'd love to have you back, Bang. Can't thank you enough for the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, always, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And if you enjoyed this episode, we strongly encourage you to become a member of the Golfer's Journal, or if you already are, to share it with your friends. As a reader-supported publication, we couldn't do it without you. We also couldn't do it without the help of our partners, and they are Titleist, Scotty Cameron, FootJoy, Holderness & Bourne, Omega, Charles Schwab, and BMW. We'll see you next time on the Golfer's Journal podcast.